thing called an axon, which goes to a target cell that sends information from the central nervous system to something a long ways away. It might be, well, the motor, these cell bodies of the nerves that are going to your big toe are coming out of your spinal cord back up here, traveling all the way down to the leg and telling those little muscles to flex your toe or flex your finger. So these somatic motor, these axons can be very, very long. Sensory is taking information from the outside world, like you stubbed your toe, you cut your finger, and coming back and going into the central nervous system. The cell bodies of these somatic motor neurons, right, are in the ventral horn. The cell bodies of these somatic sensory are in that dorsal root ganglion. They're not in the central nervous system. And then it comes back and says, help, help, we're feeling something. So realize that these different types of neurons, they're all just going from where they're sending information or where they're getting information coming back to the central nervous system, but their cell bodies are in different places. And there's a sign. So somatic motor neuron does it all by itself. It takes the information from the spinal cord and sends it to the muscle, wherever that muscle happens to be. Same way, the sensory information picks it up somewhere in the outside part of the body, takes it all the way back to the central nervous system, in this case, the spinal cord. Okay, so here are examples. Okay, so here's a somatic motor. So the cell bodies down here in the ventral horn, goes out through the ventral root. When it gets to the spinal nerve, part of it, one goes up to the dorsal ramus, to the part in the middle of the back, and others go down the ventral ramus to other parts of the body. Somatic sensory, okay, they pick up their information out here on the body somewhere, travel back through the ventral rami and dorsal rami, come back into the spinal nerve. Their cell bodies are here. They're not back here. The cell bodies are in this dorsal root ganglion, but the axon goes from here all the way back to here, and there they synapse in the dorsal root and pass the information, which then goes up the spinal cord. So each of these is an axon. It has an end here and a synapse up here, but the cell bodies are in different places in the axon. But there's just one axon going from the outside world to the central nervous system in both of those cases. So here's just what I showed you all glommed together, right? The motor, somatic motor, cell bodies are here in the ventral horn, travel out the ventral roots, go to the spinal cord, and then go to the dorsal and ventral rami to get to wherever they're going. The sensory information picks up information out here, comes back in through either a dorsal ramus or a ventral ramus or anterior posterior ramus, comes back up. Its cell bodies is not here in the central nervous system. It's out here in this dorsal root ganglion, and then it sends the information back here, okay, where it goes into the dorsal horn. Okay, that was somatic stuff. Somatic sensory, somatic motor. That's the stuff we sort of know about. That's what we're really used to, right? That's what we think about. Yes?
Does the axon travel all the way up to the brain before it synapses?
No, they send you the synapse in the cord, and then it goes up there. Yes?
So the two things you just went over, the two somatic, they're both single axons? Like
Yes. Yes. In contrast, you'll recall when we get to, well, that's what we're going to get to. Yes, that was why that big banner says, these are single axons that go from the outside world to the central nervous system. Okay, now we're going to talk about visceral motor and visceral sensory. Okay, this is concerned with, visceral motor is concerned with like smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Okay, not biceps and pectoralis muscles or your abdominal muscles. And then the sensory is picking up information from those structures, particularly glandular structures or blood vessels, which can sense if they're being stretched or starved to death. Okay, so this is the, visceral motor and visceral sensory. Starting with visceral motor. Okay, the tissues that receive visceral motor innervation for the umpteenth time are cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands. So visceral motor tells your heart to speed up or slow down. It tells your smooth muscles in the blood vessels to contract. It tells the smooth muscle in your gut to do peristalsis and push the food along, and other organs and things like that. And glands, it tells glands to sweat or exude various odors or whatever those glands happen to be doing. So realize that although we think about viscera in terms of guts and lungs and hearts, smooth muscle is also found in the body wall. Your arteries have smooth muscle in them. Your sweat glands are glands, and they're out here in your skin. So it's not just bits of guts and other organs. Okay, there are two types of nerves that carry visceral motor innervation. Now we have heard about both of them. There are the sympathetics, which originate. These are going to be two nerve systems, so each is going to have a preganglionic. It's going to have a part that comes out of the central nervous system, and then somewhere out there it's going to join a second nerve that's going to go to do its stuff. Okay? So the two types of visceral motor innervation are the sympathetic system, which has its initial nerves, the preganglionics, the ones before the synapse, from T1 to L2. So all sympathetic nerves, wherever they end up, they start off somewhere along here and may travel by various routes, which we'll talk about. The parasympathetic motor system is often referred to as the craniosacral part. And parasympathetic nerves, the preganglionics, the first chain in the first link in the chain, starts either in the brain, and there are a bunch of cranial nerves that have parasympathetic components. The one that you're familiar with now is this biggie down here, the vagus nerve, which provide parasympathetics to thoracic structures, including lungs and heart. And then there's another source of parasympathetics down here in the sacrum, S2, 3, and 4, sometimes S3 and 4, and that's where the parasympathetics going to pelvic structures and the last parts of the guts come from. Okay, unlike the somatic sensory and motor, the visceral motor is a two-neuron system. So there's the first part, which starts somewhere in the central nervous system, either the brain or T1 through L2 or down in the sacrum. One axon travels along, has a synapse with a second axon. So this is the preganglionic part, this is the postganglionic part, and this axon is going to actually go to the organ that has to be innervated. So there's always two. Okay. So whenever you're worried about visceral motor, you have to worry about, gee, where are the preganglionics coming from? Okay, where's the cell bodies? And if it's the sympathetic, it's going to be somewhere between T1 and L2. If it's parasympathetic, it's either going to be the brain or the sacral part of the spinal cord. Where is the postganglionic cell body? Okay, because that's the part that's going to synapse with the end of the first axon. And how does the nerves do the nerves get from one to the other? How do they get from the preganglionic to meet up with the postganglionic? And how does the postganglionic get from its synapse with the preganglionic to the structure it's innervating? And they're very different in different parts of the body. Okay, so back to our contrast. Sympathetic is a 2-neuron system. Parasympathetic is a 2-neuron system. This is visceral motor. They both require 2 neurons to go from the central nervous system to the part of the body they're innervating. Sympathetic preganglionic are in that intermediolateral column, that stuff right behind the lateral horn, from T1 to L2. That's the only place they can come from. Okay? The parasympathetics, okay, come from either the brain or the sacral region. The preganglionics come from either down from the top or up from the bottom of the spinal, of the central nervous system. The postganglionic cell bodies, the place where the first nerve meets the second nerve in the sympathetic system, lies along what are called the paravertebral ganglia. So when you look in the back side, the posterior mediastinum today, running right along the side of the thoracic vertebrae, you will see these little ganglia connected by other nervous tissue. And that's where all these sympathetic preganglionics are meeting the postganglionics in most cases. Okay. And then they're going to go from there out to whatever organs. For the parasympathetic system, the preganglionics, as we say, come from either the brain or the sacral region, and then they travel all the way to the organ they're going to innervate, and you do not see the synapse and you do not see the postganglionics because they all take place within the organ itself. So these preganglionics are going to go all the way into heart tissue, and somewhere in there will be a synapse and the postganglionic will be in there, but you can't find it. And likewise, when we get to the gut, they're going to come all the way down to the whatever gut, and in that organ itself, there's a little bitty postganglionic. So you will see both of these, preganglionics and postganglionics. You will never see those. Okay, so sympathetics. Okay, they originate here, right, in this intermediolateral column. They're going to travel out. They're going to travel out this ventral root because that's what's carrying motor stuff, and sympathetics are doing motor stuff. Okay, they're going to go out into the spinal nerve, and then they're going to loop down through this white ramus communicans, and in many cases, at least 14 cases, they will synapse here in these paravertebral ganglia that you'll see in the course of your dissection today. The postganglionics will come back up here. Some of them will go out with the ventral ramus to do the hypaxial structures. Some of them will go out the dorsal ramus to do stuff out in the epaxial region. So here's the cell bodies of the preganglionics. They're all lying right here in this lateral horn, coming out the ventral root, going down through the white ramus into this ganglion, paravertebral ganglion, synapsing there. Postganglionics to the body wall are going to go out in the ventral ramus and go out to whatever blood vessels and sweat glands and stuff in the epaxial region, or up here to the hypaxial region. Yes? Well, a lot of hands on this one. Yes?
When you're describing the pathway, do you have to say it goes out the ventral horn too, or is that like understood? Like if we were writing out.
If you get it to the ventral ramus, ventral root, you'll be okay.
Okay.
But it obviously has to go through there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is the white ramus begin?
I guess the white ramus. That's a good question. The thing that you would pin as a white ramus communicans in terms of us would be just this little part here. The connection between the ventral ramus and the paravertebral ganglion.
The entire axon is.
The axon travels in here, but it is a white ramus communicans here when it's connecting the ventral ramus to the ganglion. And likewise, the gray ramus is the one that's connecting in the other direction. Yes, well, I'm back.
The paravertebral ganglion is part of the synthetic trunk.
Yes. Yes, they are a part of the sympathetic trunk. I'll get to it in a minute. But yes, they're the blobs in the central, in the sympathetic trunk. Yes?
Are there occurrences where it doesn't, once the synapse occurs at the paravertebral ganglion, it doesn't go back up the gray ramus, it just goes and directly innervates the organ?
Yes, there are several. We'll get to that. There's lots of little twists and turns to this system. We'll get that 3 or 4 slides later. Yes?
This is silly, but for it to get to the dorsal ramus, does it have to go through the ventral ramus to the spinal nerve to get to the ventral ramus, or can it bypass the ventral ramus and go directly to the spinal
No,
nerve?
no. It's a two nerve system, and the only way to get to the dorsal ramus, this guy it doesn't do any good for him to go to the dorsal ramus, because it can't do anything. It's only the postganglionics that can do anything. So it's got to come down to this ganglion, and then from a ganglion, it's only the postganglionics that can do anything in the dorsal
Yeah,
ramus.
that's what I was asking. The postganglionic cells, do they have to re-enter the ventral ramus to get to the dorsal ramus?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the ganglia come off of the ganglia are hanging off the ventral ramus.
Okay.
They're not hanging off the spinal nerve. You would think they'd be more efficient to put it there and save all this stuff, but things. Unfortunately, this body wasn't designed at MIT. Yes, ma'am.
So synapse occurs at the paravertebral ganglion, but not at the dorsal.
Yes, dorsal root ganglion is something else again.
Right. Okay.
There are other. Well, we'll get to this later. Okay, so here is an example. Okay, so motor innervation, a sympathetic nerve, a vascular smooth muscle in the 6th intercostal space. So it comes out the intermediolateral column, travels down with the ventral root to the spinal nerve, down the T6 ventral ramus, through a white ramus communicans to the